You found Why We Are Christians. My name is Kent Philpott, and today we're talking with Andrew MacDonald. I think you're someplace near Chicago, aren't you, Andrew?
Yes, I live in Wheaton, Illinois, so just a little bit to the west of Chicago there.
Okay, Wheaton, Illinois. I've heard about it many times. I've
Hmm.
never been there.
Really? That
I've
surprises me.
never been there. I've flown in and out of Chicago a few times, of course.
Hmm.
But you just tell us what you're doing in Wheaton right now.
Yeah, so I'm the associate director of the Wheaton College Billy Graham Research Institute. So it's a long title there, but it's essentially that I oversee or contribute to all of the short-term and long-term research projects that we're overseeing and conducting through the BGC there at Wheaton College.
Sounds good. Sounds good, Andrew. Very good. And so we're gonna start this interview two-parter, and we just want to get to know you a little bit. And so talk about, please, family of origin. Where do y'all come from?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in a suburb of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, named Oakville, Ontario. My mother and father were both believers. I was raised, my father is a third generation Baptist, Fellowship Baptist from good farming stock, Ontario, good family farm, still in the family to this day, from his grandfather. And deacons in the Baptist church for generations. And my mother was a military brat, was raised Lutheran, and father, very, very strict military engineer. She lived on bases from British Columbia all the way to Newfoundland, and eventually found her way to live in London, Ontario, where she met my father. And so I kind of grew up in a hodgepodge mix of evangelical churches, from Brethren in Christ to Baptist to non-denominational evangelical church. So I had a good flavoring across the board. So I have some of that high church liturgy from my mother and some of that low church piety from my father. So it's a good mix.
Well said, Andrew. I can imagine that. And so where did you fit in family-wise? You had brothers and sisters?
I do. I have an older brother, Matthew, a younger brother, Spencer, and a younger sister, Emma. She's the baby of the family. So there was three of us for a long time, and then the fourth one came along.
So what town did you actually grow up in?
So in Oakville, Ontario. So it's about half an hour west of Toronto. So
Okay.
Toronto is a giant city, and Oakville is kind of sandwiched between Toronto and then Hamilton, just a little bit further south. So if you know your evangelical history, Hamilton was the site of a lot of revivals in the late 19th century that sprang up. Really, a lot of the Fellowship Baptists grew out of those revivals. So some of those churches still stand today.
Is that right? Wow. Well, I happen to be a Baptist myself.
Mm.
I was converted in a Baptist church in 1963, and in my 37th year, pastor of Miller Avenue Baptist Church in Mill Valley. So we have
And was
that.
You were raised converted in the Southern Baptist, or was it a National Baptist?
It was Southern Baptist Church, First Baptist Church of Fairfield, and we're loosely associated with what used to be American Baptists and Southern Baptists, and but we're pretty close to being an independent kind of church. But so you went to high school there in that city?
I did. Went to high school there.
And did you play any sports, Andrew?
I did. I grew up playing hockey, as any good Canadian will. I learned to skate when I was very young and played hockey all the way through grade school into high school and even up into college. I still lace up the skates whenever I can when the pandemic isn't keeping us at home. And
Okay.
but I'll hockey was my bread and butter.
Okay. And you still have teeth.
I do. I have actually, I have 2 concussions and several sprained wrists, but that's the worst that I have to show for my hockey.
Really? Yeah. There's a hockey team that you root for?
I do. I'm a diehard Toronto Maple Leafs fan, so I
Okay,
still
Maple Leafs.
follow.
Yay,
The,
Maple Leafs.
yes, I still follow them whenever I get a chance to watch a game. I can.
Okay, good, good. So, where'd you go to college?
I went to Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. So a small town in between Toronto and Ottawa, known mainly for its federal prisons, and as it's a beautiful little town and it's a great little college. I thoroughly enjoyed my time there.
Okay. Did do any sports in college? No.
No, it'll stun you, but I am not the most athletic person in the world, and so
You're not.
no, despite the heart, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is non-athletic, verging on flabby. So, not exactly quoting Paul perfectly, but I'll do what I can.
Yeah. You sound a lot like me. Baseball's my game, but I was never very good at it.
I love to play baseball in the summertime, but I'm not very good at it, but love to get out with people and play when you can get enough people, that is.
If you can get enough, yeah. What was your major in college, Andrew?
I was a history major with a minor in philosophy. So
okay.
I had I went in for history, and I had a Jewish professor of philosophy in my first year. I took gen ed class in philosophy, and he was so impactful to me, really challenged me in my faith, but in a way that was very empathetic, that I ended up taking it as a minor as well.
Okay. Yeah, good. So you say that your parents were believers, although 2 different denominations, not unusual. And do you remember early days when you first began to get a little bit of an idea of what Christianity was about? Can you reflect back on those early times?
Yeah, it's always a good question to ask somebody who grew up in the church, kind of what historically we'd call kind of organic faith. I would say that I had several kind of stages of growth and maturity in my life where my faith became real at different levels to me. I think on an experiential level. In high school, I started to kind of grasp some elements of the gospel in a true sense of my need for not just happiness and enjoyment, but a need for fulfillment and satisfaction, as kind of Augustine talks about. The soul is restless until it finds rest in God. And so definitely that beginnings of that understanding of something needing to be greater. And I was baptized after making a profession of faith. I was later than most of my siblings and friends into high school, grade 10 or 11. And then off in university, I went on an exchange program to England, and it was there that I started a Bible study. And it was that time being alone by myself and having to really be challenged by my classmates who were not believers. I was one of very few believers in this exchange program, and being challenged by them to, is this really going to be yours, or is it going to be something that you just pretend to do while other people are looking? And few big instances in that have crystallized in my mind of really, am I going to take hold of this as something that's authentically mine, or am I going to kind of coast off of the coattails of someone coming before me? And so I'd say 2 big instances: my baptism, and then this testing of being on my own were 2 big pieces. But I'd say that one of the biggest things for me was my father in my my second year of university gave me J.I. Packer's Knowing God. And that was the first time reading that book that I got a true sense. I had been reading my Bible for most of my life. I knew kind of the ins and outs of Scripture pretty well. But having it presented in front of me in a really systematic way, I really understood what the gospel was, who God was, what it meant to know him, the depth of his character, and the richness of the Christian tradition as it kind of opened up. And so I would say those three events were very formative, kind of a baptism initiation into the church, internalizing and making it of my own at college, and then again later in college, an understanding of the depth of the Christian tradition and diving in.
Andrew, you mentioned J.I. Packer. I got a chance to meet him one day some years ago. An English publisher, Evangelical Press, published about 3 or 4 or 5, maybe 6 of my books. And I would go to the big conventions. And the last day of the convention, I was all by myself in the booth. And here comes this gentleman, sort of bent over in a suit. And I said, that has got to be J.I. Packer. I went and stood right in front of him, made him stop. And I said, who are you? He told me his name, and I got to shake his hand. We stood there and talked for a few minutes. But yeah, I love the book, Knowing God. You bet. Tremendous impact.
It's a great book, and he is such or it was, sadly, great for him to be in the presence of the Lord.
Yeah.
But he is in an age where many Christian leaders are being revealed to have low character and have been caught in schemes of lies and deception and all that. Packer is an example of a Christian who endured to the end. He
did. You're right. And yeah, so many, all Christians are notorious sinners. We know this. And so few of us escape, but he was one who was and is an example to others. So you're there and you're becoming more and more aware of the meaning of what Jesus is all about.
You and I come at it from very different angles in terms of our experience, but it's just a great example of the diversity that is in the kingdom of God, of that you have this powerful conversion. I know the story of yours. You and I have talked about it before. And mine is more of a slow dawning awareness. So I think those are two great pictures of different ways that the gospel works.
Yeah, indeed. There's probably no two new birth experiences that are identical, but they all end up in the same thing. Being a follower of Jesus. That's what it's all about. That's the fun in life. So then you went to, you were in England for a while, and then you came back, and what happened then?
So then I went to Biola University, to Talbot School of Theology, their graduate school there, their seminary, to do a master's of philosophy of religion. So I finished I wanted to do graduate school, but I was unsure which direction I wanted to go in terms of history or philosophy. And a Christian mentor of mine really had poured into me as an influence. And he actually was a New Testament scholar, so he wasn't a philosopher himself, but he encouraged me to go to Talbot to take this master's degree. And so I went out there for a master's degree. And while I was out there, I really developed a sense of calling for academia and research, loved studying and writing and just the higher education as a whole. And I also met my wife, who was a undergraduate. She had just graduated from Biola's undergraduate program, and we met. And so I finished up my my master's degree, and a few months after I finished up my master's degree, we got engaged and moved. She's from Chicago, and so we moved back to Chicago into her hometown.
But you were back in Los Angeles when you were going to school, Talbot and Biola, right?
I was. I loved living in Los Angeles, except for I joke that if there was 25% less people, it would be perfect.
Yes. Well, I grew up my high school, first 2 years of college in Los Angeles, northernmost part, Salentahunga.
Yeah, it's you get used to that weather very quickly, of just steady, always perfect, never bad. And then moving out here to Chicago, where today it was rainy, and then last week or on Monday we had 6 inches of snow, and on the weekend we're going to be up to 60. So
wow,
it's living in Chicago.
Yeah, I kind of like California, frankly.
I don't know
what Andrew, what's your wife's first name?
Jenna.
Jenna?
Jenna, Jenna.
I have a daughter by the name of Jenna. I have twin daughters, Jenna and Laura.
Yeah, I joke with her. Her name is Jenna, and so she can't stand being called Jennifer. Her name is Jenna. And so when I really want to kind of stick the needle in, I'll call her Jennifer, and she can't stand it. So
now I know you've got a couple of kids.
I do. We have Lucy, who is 5, and we have Micah, who is 2, but turning 3 next week.
So there you are. You're back now, and you're back now, and after you got married, you finished your school. You're at Chicago, or were you back in Canada?
No, we moved back to Chicago. Jenna got a job teaching at a Christian school. Coming out of her, and she got into an online master's degree program for education. So she was doing both of those, night school online and then teaching full time at a Christian school. And I got a job at a church out here in Chicago for a year as I was contemplating what I wanted to do after I finished my master's degree. I had applied to a couple PhD programs, but didn't get into any ones that I really wanted to get into. And then the ones that I did get into, I wasn't excited about. So I was trying to rethink what I wanted to do. And then while working at this church, I got introduced to Douglas Sweeney, who was a professor at Trinity Evangelical Divinity in Chicago. And that turned me on to the history program, the historical theology program at Trinity.
Okay.
And so I ended up applying to do a PhD, go back to my first love of history, in historical theology at Trinity, studying with Doug. And I got accepted, but I also had several other offers from other schools to go and study philosophy. And I was going to take one of them until Doug called me up on the phone and basically told me that I needed to come to Trinity, and he wasn't going to take no for an answer. And we prayed about it. We didn't have a lot. And so the idea of going to an unfunded PhD program at Trinity versus a fully funded PhD program somewhere else was not a great idea. But we believed God was calling us to Trinity. And so we clicked go on the acceptance. And 2 weeks after clicking go on the acceptance, I won the Waybright Fellowship Award, which gave me a full scholarship to Trinity for my PhD. So, you know, God came through. We trusted Him. We placed our future in His hands. And two weeks after clicking go, everything was taken care of.
Wonderful. What was your thesis for your PhD?
So I'm still just coming toward the end of that right now. I'm hopefully going to be defending in the next few months here. So my topic looks at urban ministry at the end of the 19th century. So how the growth of cities changed urban ministry and church theology as cities became really powerful and big. And so it's a fascinating time in American history, and the church is both vibrant but also changing. And so it's a great time to study.
Wow. Okay, so you're still in your PhD program right now.
I am. I'm just hopefully going to be defending in the next few months.
Really? Okay. Wow. So now, how are you making your living during this doing all of this education?
So for the first few years, my scholarship pays for my room and board, our living, and for my fee tuition. But in 2017, a friend of mine sent me a job application for the Billy Graham Center that I wasn't interested in applying for, and I ignored him. And 2 weeks later, he sent me the application again and said, basically, fill it out, or I'm going to come over there and beat you up. He's a good friend. We're very close, and he so I filled it out, and I got a call back for an interview, and I wasn't really thinking that much about it, but I ended up pulling my back the night before cleaning, and so I was laid out in a ton of pain, and so I thought, well, this is a sign from God. This isn't to be, and so my wife drove me down to Wheaton from Deerfield, and I sat there for the interview in pain that I was having a bad time masking. And I walked out of there thinking that was the worst interview I've ever done before. And they called me back and they offered me the job.
Wow. Well, I could see how you would fit.
Well, I hope I fit. I've been there for 3 years now. So if I don't fit, then they're just being extraordinarily kind in putting up with me.
Okay. Can you give us a little bit of history of the Billy Graham Center?
Of course, yeah. So the Billy Graham Center was founded in 1980 in a partnership between the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association and Wheaton College. And it was designed to be a world hub for research, equipping, and ministry associated with evangelism and mission. And so Billy wanted the Billy Graham Center to be not so much an academic think tank, but a bridge between the academy and the church, specifically around helping churches evangelize and think critically about Christian mission. Wow. And so we don't do what we like to say is we don't do the evangelism. We're not out there evangelizing, although as a team, our director, Dr. Ed Stetzer, he prioritizes in every single staff meeting that each one of us needs to be evangelizing in our personal lives if we're going to be ever teaching about it. But we equip pastors, evangelists, ministry leaders to be more effective and efficient in their evangelism through webinars, classes, conferences we put on, resources we publish. We house right now 8 institutes within the Billy Graham Center. These range from Ascend Institute, which focuses on church planting. We have the ELF Institute, which is Evangelism Leadership Fellowship, Leaders Fellowship, which is like parachurch ministries like Alpha and InterVarsity come together for collaboration. We host that. And we have the Rural Church Institute, which focuses on evangelism and mission for rural churches, and then a broader range outside of that as well.
I have to say that my dad became a believer when I was 15 years old at a Billy Graham crusade in Los Angeles. And so I grew up, even before I was a Christian. This was 6 years before I became a Christian. And my dad tried to evangelize me, myself and my brothers. The night he was converted, he came back and he woke me up. He woke me up and told me he believed in Jesus. I mean, he woke me up. And he remained a strong Christian all his life. And I remember going to one Billy Graham crusade in Portland, Oregon, when I was doing a Master's of Divinity at Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary. Two students got chosen, got to a free boat up to Portland to stay and go to the crusade and be a part of the, what do they call it, a school of evangelism, that they conducted also during the Crusades.
Mm.
And I remember seeing Billy Graham, and he's always been one of my great idols. I've read Christianity Today from like the first month of my conversion, every issue. Christianity Today, that he was responsible for starting.
Yes, it was. He's such a towering figure, and I love the joke that he would tell all the time. And Erwin Lutzer, famous pastor of Moody Bible for years and years, does an amazing impression of Billy Graham doing the thing. But Billy would always joke that if you wanted to write Billy Graham a letter, you just write on it, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Billy Graham, and the post office will know what to do.
I used to hear that on the Billy Graham hour, right? Billy Graham, Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's all. What do he always say? That's all the address you need.
Yep.
I can still hear him, Andrew.
Yes, it's famous. Although I'm sure he drove many people at the post office crazy with that, with having to sort that. But their Gallup poll has done something for has asked who is the most influential figure in every single one of their surveys for 60 plus years now, and the number one answer has for the person who has been at the top of that poll the most amount of years by far is Billy Graham.
Yes,
so,
I know.
Nobody else has influenced American culture nearly as much as Billy Graham.
Yeah.
And I think it's sad that he's passed, but his legacy, beyond even just the Billy Graham Center, lies in people such as your father, who heard him and came to a real personal faith in Christ through his preaching. And so we're very thankful for him. We're thankful for all the evangelists that have followed in his footsteps.
Yes. And for many of us in the Jesus People movement, we look to him because of his evangelical emphasis, presenting the gospel of Christ boldly and easily. That was the number one reason that those of us that came out of the Jesus People movement were always loved Graham, because of his strong emphasis on preaching Jesus. That's what attracted us, Andrew. Okay, well, guess what? We've got to the end of the first program, and coming up, I really want to kind of get more involved in what you're doing there at the center and what you're hoping to do, what you're looking forward to do. All right, you've come to the end of Why We Are Christians, and be looking for the second program of our conversation with Andrew MacDonald in Chicago. So long.